And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 89th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, May 21st, 2019, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. You can catch our live broadcast Tuesday evenings at 8:30 p.m. on our YouTube page or our website. If you missed the live broadcast, you can subscribe to our show for free on whatever platforms you listen to podcasts, so you can listen on your own time. Check out our Twitter and Facebook at The Hoosier Sound and at Indiana HQ. Subscribe and turn the bell on. All of our information is in our website, indianahq.com. All right, Hoosier Nation, it is time for some sports talk. On the docket for tonight, the Hoosier baseball team is having a great season. They recently won the Big Ten title this past weekend, the number one seed in the Big Ten tournament coming up this week, and the NCAA Selection Show will take place in just under 1 week as the Hoosiers wait to see if they could potentially host a regional. Matt is here with me to help cover this topic, but we have a very special announcement, a special guest this evening, Brian Tonsoni of Delphi Bracketology, the Assembly Call, Sports Talk with Tonsoni, and IU Baseball Enthusiast is here with me and us this evening to help break down this Hoosier baseball team. Brian, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm excellent. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. Nothing I enjoy better than talking Indiana athletics, and the baseball team is the most recent successful story. So looking forward to helping you and your listeners out and maybe answering some questions.
Of course. Thank you. So let's open up with the new head coach, Jeff Mercer, the current 2019 team and their just overall season this year. So for those that might not follow too closely to the team, with new head coach Jeff Mercer coming into Bloomington this season, Brian, what were the expectations for the team coming into this current season?
You know, that's a great question. The expectations for Indiana baseball have been quite high for some time, starting with Tracy Smith in 13 and 14, and then, you know, the change in coaching staff to Lamonis and going to tournaments in several of his years. And so I think most of the Indiana baseball fans were looking forward to seeing if the tradition of winning baseball was going to survive another coaching change. And the thing that I thought was really important was that he was an experienced coach from the Midwest who wanted to come back to Indiana. And I think that motivation led me to have some comfort in the fact that I think the team is going to keep moving in the right direction. Anyone who wants to be there is going to want to put the best product on the field every night, and I think that's what has happened. And listening to Coach Mercer in his post game, I think he's really into player development. I think he's really into person development for the men in his program, and those are the kind of coaches that I really enjoy following as a basketball coach myself. I think that ultimately gets the most out of their players. So the expectations were a little bit high or higher for a new coach, and I think he met and exceeded them.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned him being an Indiana native and wanting to come back to Bloomington. I loved hearing just the little snippets that he had throughout the year of just how honored it was for him to be asked to be the coach, that he's now here, all of that kind of stuff. So in terms of specific expectations, now that we knew those expectations, how has Jeff Mercer done overall in his first year as the head coach? Do you think he met those high expectations? Do you think he's slightly underachieved, or do you think he slightly exceeded those expectations?
I think he's met and gone above and beyond. Coach Lamonis was an outstanding coach, is doing really well at Mississippi State, never won a Big Ten outright championship. And so Coach Mercer coming in, convincing the guys that came for Coach Lamonis to play his brand of baseball and adapt to his practice policies and his approach to hitting and pitching and fielding in order to go 17-7 in the Big Ten, which is a conference that is really growing baseball-wise, I think speaks volumes for a coach. I think the baseball world at Indiana needs to be a little cautious, because sometimes in the second year of recruiting, you have some key graduates this year. You know, we'll really be able to tell in years 2, 3, and 4 if Coach Mercer really meets and exceeds those expectations. But for a first-year coach, this is an exciting time for Indiana baseball.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So Um, Speaking of his first year of success, and then in terms of going forward, how much of this year's success do you think was Jeff Mercer specifically versus the talent on the roster? What kinds of things does a manager do to make a difference on the field specifically?
I think with the coaching change, they have to manage the personalities. And I don't think any team goes 36-19, 17-7 if a new coach doesn't come in and manage the personalities. There was some talent coming back in Matt Lloyd and Paulie Milto on the mound. And to be able to utilize that and keep those guys moving forward, Ryan Feynman's another senior that has really done well this year. So I think that chemistry, sometimes that's overused word in athletics, but I think the chemistry and everyone accepting their roles. He's had to make a couple tough decisions that in the shortstop area, benching a 2-year starter and making some moves with some injuries. And I think he's really, made really solid decisions. And sometimes as a coach, you make decisions and it doesn't pan out. You bring a reliever in, he gives up a 3-run home run. I think that has really been a good thing. There are some concerns. I think this team relies too much on the long ball, hitting home runs. They set a school record for hitting home runs. They also struck out 23 times against Louisville in a 1-run loss and didn't move runners over. And so there's still some things that I'm sure there's reasons for that, and I'm sure that the coaching staff is concerned about those types of things as well. But I think managing the personnel and putting players in the right position is what Coach Mercer did really, really well this year, and I think that shows with the record.
Well, you just led us right into our next question from Frame by Frame Hoops, which was, what makes Indiana such a great home run team? Like you just mentioned, they set a school record for home runs this season. So what makes them such a great home run team?
I think two things. I think they really take care of strength and conditioning, and the new word in athletics is nutrition and building your body right, and I think the players really, from what I've heard, have done that. Coach Mercer brings in a study of baseball, analytics and launch angles and things like that. And I haven't interviewed Coach Mercer, so I don't know for sure. But the talk down there amongst some of my friends who do run another website, a baseball-specific website, is that he did come in and try to change some swings. And I think that is why the ball is leaving the park. And you're seeing a wide variety of players hit home runs. Cole Barr had – I believe 2 last year, or if any, and he's now at double digits at 16. Matt Lloyd was a home run hitter. Gorski was a home run hitter before. I think Indiana's paid some with the average. And anytime you change a swing or change an approach, if you change your golf swing, you're going to go out and shoot a bad number until you grew that swing. And so, that is my one concern as this team goes forward into the Big Ten tournament and into the NCAA is, can they continue hitting home runs in certain ballparks? They're hitting for average and moving runners. They started to do a little bit more of that the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I think that's finally, they're getting all of this analytics and the swings, angles, and all of that down to being productive, not just hitting home runs. So I'm a little wishful there that the total product of Coach Mercer is now starting to be seen here at the end of the year.
Which makes sense. Yeah. You talked about changing swings. Is that something that's common in college? Is that something that like the players might give pushback, or did he just probably do it in a way that the players bought into what he was saying?
Both. Again, I'm a basketball coach mainly here in Indiana, but big sports fan. And I think you got to coach what you believe in. And if he believes in a swing being a certain way, then he's got to come in his first year and coach his players in that way. And there will always be a little blowback from especially your senior class and junior class that I've swung this way all through my AAU, travel ball, baseball, and high school and college. And now you're going to come in and want me to change that for the team. And that's, again, back to managing those personalities, getting some players to buy in. What do you do discipline-wise for those teams, those key players that may or may not? And again, I think this is a very good team chemistry. So I think most of the young men adapted to the changes in approach very well, and those who refused were able to find just a way to move forward with that. And that goes for both hitting and on the mound. With I've seen increased velocity from players, and especially some of the young players on the mound. Some of these young kids are throwing 91, 93, and at Indiana baseball, most of the time since 2013 I've been attending as a season ticket holder, it's 87 to 91 range, and we're starting to see some guys just nice and easy at the 92, 93 range from some young kids that we don't see a lot of. So I think the velocity is up on the mound. I think the home runs are up in the batter's box, and I think that's the players buying in and the coach doing a good job of teaching the way he believes the game should be played.
So it sounds like a lot of the players are improving. So who has impressed you the most of the players on the roster this season?
Yeah, I have two favorites. I believe Paulie Milto, the Friday night starter, he's just a really tough-nosed young man. He's gotten hit a little bit the last 2 or 3 weeks, but he's also played some better competition, and he's kept Indiana in the baseball game. Early in the season, he was not getting much run support and would lose a 2-0.
Yeah,
he did not get any mention on any of the all Big Ten tournament teams, and there's a lot of Indiana fans who are quite upset with that because I think he's really the ace of our staff, and sometimes wins and losses isn't really, and the stats don't really show what kind of competitor Paulie Milto is. But he's gone out there every Friday night and put the best effort out there against the number one starter, which that's a concern from Indiana. They have not fared well against number one starters on Friday nights offensively. So Paulie Milto is one of my favorites, and then Matt Lloyd is just an incredible player, pitcher. Key home runs, hitting a walk-off against Minnesota, saving games, and then Rutgers Friday night in a tight game. I'm sitting on the front row behind home plate, and Matt Gorski's on second base, and it kind of looked like they were going to make a pickoff move towards second, and it really looked like Gorski might be in trouble, and Matt Lloyd had the wherewithal to call timeout, and I don't know too many people who recognize that, but he was calling time. The home plate umpire called time and really saved an out at second. Next pitch, a home run to center field. And so, he's just a gutsy guy, and he'll go down all time. Again, I started watching baseball 2013 when Bart Kaufman Field was created and built. What a wonderful place to watch baseball, and been a season ticket holder ever since. And I think those two they're not there with Schwarber and Travis and Donato, some of those guys who went to the College World Series, but they're right behind them in some of the favorite players that I've watched in the last 6 or 7 years.
I think as a casual IU baseball fan, I think a lot of us know Matt Lloyd, but it was nice to hear Paulie Milto and just all the other kind of stuff he does. But on the other side of things, if there was one thing that was holding this team back, what would that be?
I think ability to make solid contact and put the ball in play. Losing 8-7 to Louisville might be a game that ends up costing Indiana a chance to host, and they struck out 23 times. I think Indiana has a weakness on off-speed pitches. They love to hit the fastball. Well, in the second half of the season, everyone knows they love to hit the fastball. And curveballs and changeups have been the nemesis here of late. I do think they're making adjustments in their approach, like I said. And I'm an old guy, and I like that move runners and hit runners behind runners to move them over type of stuff. And the new analytics of, hit the ball high and launch angle, those are all new. And some of us old codgers have a hard time dealing with that. But as a coach, I do respect that when you have a philosophy and you put it into play and you win a Big Ten championship, then whether I appreciate it or not. But I think the strikeouts concern me against really quality pitcher. We'll see tomorrow night against the number one. Indiana did beat Iowa on a Friday night, but it was 3-2. It was close, and the game was won late. So even though it's a 1 versus an 8 seed in the Big Ten tournament, can Indiana hit against real outstanding pitching? That'll be my concern going forward.
Gotcha. And before we quickly get into the Big Ten tournament specifically, we had a question come in from Rob. How does a team benefit by having a legend like Scott Rowland on the staff? And I could go over all of his accolades from his time playing in college and professionally, but I think we'd be here for another 20 minutes before you started talking. So how does a team benefit having a guy like Scott on the staff?
Well, I think every dream of every high school baseball player is to come in and spend 3 years or 2 years until they're draft eligible and get drafted to go to the minor leagues and eventually to the major leagues. And now you have someone who is on staff who can assist with talking about that. Not only that, that helps recruiting, to bring people in to be able to, have conversations with a pro, and not just any pro, but a guy who is really talented. For a couple of organizations, and an Indiana guy from Jasper. So he knows the state, he knows the program. And then on a day-to-day basis too, baseball's a weird game. You can have 2 bloops in a week and your average goes up, and you can hit, 8 liners right to people. And it's a game of frustration. It's a game of failure. And to have a guy who has been through that at the highest of levels can help on the game today in that player development, whatever his official title is. There's rules about on-field coaching and all that are beyond my understanding. But man, having someone like that is just an asset to the program, and kudos to Coach Mercer for asking and for Coach Rowland to saying yes and volunteering his time. I just see there's nothing but positives from him as far as on-field performance and getting kids in. And then also, I think the role of any good program, especially for the university that we like and love, is do you help kids move forward out after their eligibility's up? And I think Coach Rowland does a good job in that part as well.
Mm-hmm. So do you think Jeff Mercer is someone that looks up to someone like Scott Rowland? Because, of course, Jeff is a 33-year-old guy, so a lot of his staff is going to be older than him. Is that a guy you think he looks up to?
Absolutely. And there's another thing, too, is Scott Rowland's been through a lot of strategy and a lot of different high-pressure games and to help the coaching staff. And we all need mentors. And that's a benefit that sometimes people might not bring up. So that's a great point. I do think he looks up to him. I do think he looks at him as someone who could help him with advice as far as what's going on inside and outside the baseball program.
Okay, so let's move on to the Big Ten tournament, since that starts tomorrow as we're recording this Tuesday evening. Indiana is the number 1 seed, starts out against the number 8 seed, because the Big Ten tournament in baseball, they don't use the whole field. So they're going to play the 8 seed Iowa before playing either number 4 Minnesota or number 4 Nebraska in a double elimination bracket. If they win their first matchup, they will play the winner of Minnesota or Nebraska. If they lose, they'll play the loser. What kind of matchups does Indiana have in their first round of games against either Iowa, Nebraska, and or Minnesota?
The tournaments, you always think the 1 seed should be a huge favorite over the 8 seed. I think this Big Ten baseball tournament is about as even as you're going to get for 8 teams. 2 weeks ago, Iowa was mentioned in some potential brackets from a variety of college baseball sites as being the 4th team from the Big Ten to make the NCAA baseball tournament. They had 2 or 3 bad weeks. They got swept by Maryland. So you're looking at an 8 seed that was a potential NCAA tournament team just 2 weeks ago that has beaten quality opponents all year. If Iowa can refine that magic, tomorrow night's going to be a very, very tough matchup for Indiana. And Indiana did sweep Iowa in the regular season, 3 games. It was a close Friday night game. And again, in the game of baseball, anything can happen. The game is in Omaha. The fences are quite deep. The prevailing wind is blowing in at Omaha, and the home run that's sometimes needed for Indiana offense could come back to hurt Indiana in a big ballpark like that. So that's a concern of mine. And then once you get past that first game, the top 5 teams, really, all of them can be considered for the tournament. Minnesota probably has no chance to make it due to their record is close to 500 or just under 500, but they're a quality opponent. Beat Indiana on a Friday night, was ahead on their Saturday night, which would be game 2 of the Big Ten tournament, until a major comeback late in that Saturday effort earlier in the season. So, and Nebraska is thought to be a 2 or a 3 seed, depending on which site you look at. So it's going to be a grinding effort for whoever comes out Sunday as Big Ten champions. It's a lot of pitching is going to be needed. I do think Indiana's pitching depth is outstanding. I think they have 4 quality starters, and the young man Gabe Bierman has come on with an outstanding effort at Michigan late. So I think that the starting pitching is there. The bullpen has been okay, but I think the matchups are going to be tough, and they're tough for anyone 1 through 8 in the Big Ten tournament.
It's actually funny you just mentioned about Omaha and the size of the ballpark. So Joel from Indiana HQ asked how the size of the ballpark in Omaha will affect the game plan going forward. Will Mercer play some small ball? I don't expect them to stop trying to hit home runs, but they're going to obviously change an approach, right?
You know, listening to Coach Mercer, he talks, we try to hit line drives,
Mm-hmm.
but the ball's been going out of the park. So, you know, if the approach is to hit line drives, you can hit gaps and you can find gaps in that outfield, get extra bases, and that's going to be the way Indiana's going to have to win. Or you pull the ball down the line. You can't hit the ball from left center to right center in Omaha, a college player, and expect to hit the ball out of the park. Do I see a major change in approach? No, I don't think coaches change a lot. I do think that you've seen some lower lineup guys sacrifice bunting later in the year. And so you may see some guys in the 8-9 spots trying to move runners over. That has been, you know, not used tremendously. And again, you got to be who you are, I think, as a coach in a program. If you go changing for one opponent or you go changing for one venue, then that creates doubt in the players' minds, like we're not good enough. Indiana's the Big Ten champs. We hit the ball hard. Let's go out and hit the ball hard and hit it over the outfielder's head, hit it into some gaps and run the bases. And I think, you know, the approach of a solid, you know, swing angle and solid bat speed will produce results, and at least hope so. If not, then we know the ballpark does create a different scenario. And you know, I think a lot of that's legend too, with the College World Series and the broadcast. You know, there is no doubt that there are less home runs hit there, but again, I think you got to be who you are, or it's not good.
In terms of in terms of trying to swing for the fences and trying to hit those gaps, for the casual IU fan that might be tuning in just for some postseason player at the end of the year, who is the most important hitter for the Hoosiers in your opinion? And also on the other side, who's the most important pitcher for the Hoosiers?
You know, that's hard to nail down, because I always believe the top of the lineup is important to get guys on. Drew Ashley does a nice job hitting 275 on the year of stirring the pot. And when he is getting on base, then you have the next 3 or 4 batters are really solid in Matt Gorski, Matt Lloyd, and Elijah Dunham. So the top of that lineup is really good. And then, you know, you have guys like Grant Richardson who can bat anywhere from 6 to 8, who have 9 home runs, can hit the ball really hard. And Cole Barr is sitting at number 5 with 16 home runs. So the lineup is dangerous. Wow. I think 1 through 7, 1 through 8. But if you had to ask me the key, I would say Matt Gorski being Matt Gorski. Matt Gorski is thought to be a top 5 rounds pick, not a top 5 overall, but rounds 1 through 5 type of athlete. Struggled a little bit with the new approach with his batting average. Has hit 12 home runs on the season, hitting 279, but he was up about the 330 mark last year. So the key to me is, can Matt Gorski string together a couple multi-hit games? If that's happening, then I think Indiana has a good chance to be successful. On the mound, I think, you know, all 3 starters are really good. Andrew Saalfrank, the Sunday starter, was named Big Ten Pitcher of the Year. And from the third starter aspect, that's pretty awesome. I wonder if Coach Mercer might move him up into day 1 or day 2, depending on matchups and the scouting report, which I'm not too familiar with the other teams, but sometimes baseball coaches will move pitchers around. But Saalfrank is probably a starter to watch. And I think the bullpen is really, really important. There's been some injuries and some changes in personnel from the start, and that was a struggle early in the season, and it's starting to round out right now. But I think, you know, again, Matt Lloyd being a closer, Connor Manis, and the bullpen, Gabe Bierman, if they can come in and shut down threats and hold leads, then that's going to be the key for the tournament.
All right. Okay. So talking about holding leads, Dakota from Indiana HQ asks, what postseason ramifications happen if IU wins the Big Ten tournament? And then he also asks, what about if they lose early? So if we go and we make a run and we win, what does that mean for the NCAA tournament as far as IU goes?
Yeah, Carl James, a friend of mine, and he does some writing on IU baseball and does some bracketology. We're used to that with the basketball world.
Yeah.
But he does some college baseball bracketology. Carl's just a fantastic guy and a smart guy, and he runs algorithms and math stuff that I don't even understand. He says that Indiana is probably 95 to 98% a 2 seed. Yeah, okay. And I believe that to be true. I think that percentage might even be higher. I think The only chance, and I think it's very slim, is if Indiana wins 4 and has a Big Ten championship and a Big Ten tournament championship, and some teams who might have been the 14th, 15th, or 16th host site loses early tournaments. That's probably the only way that Indiana could host. And I think that's less than 1%. So, and I think Indiana's just good enough by winning the Big Ten that I think they're going to be a 2 seed, especially with the bubble in baseball is just like the bubble in basketball kind of weak this year. Indiana's resume is strong. So I think they're pretty much set regardless. If they lose 2 or win 4 or something along those lines, I think they're pretty guaranteed at this point a 2 seed in some regional.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. So almost playing with house money, just seeing where they can go. Yeah. As we transition,
that plays a big role in pitching too. If you're in, yes, you want to go win this tournament, but you're not gonna blow up your starters or your bullpen to win a Big Ten tournament when you have a regional and you're going to play. You could play Louisville, Vanderbilt, some top 8, top 16 teams that are the 1 seeds. So that's some strategy for our fans to watch too. Is yes, it's important to win a Big Ten tournament, but you got something bigger right after that to be prepared for as well.
Yeah, as much as you can get a rest before you could potentially try and make a run. So speaking of getting into the NCAA tournament and where specifically the selection show is going to be this coming Monday at noon, and I think it's pretty obvious and a very, very obviously good shot at them officially getting in. But not only that, kind of sort of hosting a first round, but you just kind of talked about how they wouldn't be able to probably host a regional. But first, Brian, how does the NCAA tournament work compared to maybe the NCAA basketball tournament, since a lot of fans listening might be, of course, maybe a more basketball than baseball fan. And you already touched on where Indiana is projected now, but what are the 2 differences, I guess, between the baseball and the basketball tournament?
Yeah, there's 64 teams in the baseball tournament. All of the conferences that play baseball get automatic bids, so that's similar to basketball. And there are at-large teams just like basketball. The difference is instead of a 1-game format like basketball, the teams are sent. 4 teams are sent to 16 host sites, and each site hosts a double elimination tournament. And that's quite different than basketball. So there will be a 1 seed, a 2 seed, a 3 seed, and a 4 seed in each of the 16 host sites. And then 1 plays 4 to start out, 2 plays 3, and then losers and winners and so forth go until there's 1 team standing. At that point, each regional host is matched up with another regional host for a best of 3 series called the Super Regionals. That winner then goes to an 8-team College World Series, and they have 4-team brackets on each side that play double elimination. The winners of those 4 at the College World Series play a best 2 of 3 to win the championship. So there's a combination of double elimination, then a 3-game series like we watch in the major leagues for the most time, and 3 weekends, 4 weekends till the championship is determined. It's quite fun to watch and figure out how to get through such a regional and super regional type of setting.
Gotcha. Okay. So we had a question. Rob asked a question, what it would take for Indiana to host a regional. You already went over that. So Rob, your question was answered, but let's go into the next point that I wanted to touch on. Of course, the Big Ten is not necessarily known for their baseball compared to a conference like the SEC. Without knowing too much about collegiate baseball, you can tell this by the Big Ten basically only having 1 or 2 teams ranked in specific polls, and the Hoosiers, the recent Big Ten winners, are at the bottom of the top 25. So how does that factor into the tournament? Has Indiana played quality opponents this season to be ready for the tournament, or are they potentially in some kind of awakening if they were to play specific teams like SEC teams?
No, I think Indiana's poised to do well. Last year they went down and gave Texas A&M, beat Texas A&M, and gave Texas a good run. Those are teams in the SEC. and the Big 12 that are traditional baseball powers. I think Indiana has a squad to compete. And in reality, the number 1 seeds are going to be favored if Indiana is a 2 seed. And being 20th in some polls and 21st, that speaks of being a 2 seed in some way. And the interesting thing, a lot of times once you get to your seedings, and I don't know the whole policies, but you get placed by location. So Indiana as a 2 seed has a chance to go to a Louisville, who will be a host, or a Nashville. They try to keep some teams close. Last year, Indiana went down to Texas, but there's a lot of Big Ten teams that are going to be placed that might go in those locations too. So there's a little bit of location bias. It doesn't just go on a straight S curve. The 64th team doesn't get placed with the number 1 team, so to speak, in the tournament. So, but I think Indiana's poised to do well, and they'll get if they get in one of those pods or those regional places, they'll play the number 1 seed in the second round, and that's you get their second starter maybe, and I think Indiana can hit. Again, if they can avoid that swing and miss, I think they're going to be a real tough out, because Indiana anytime can hit a 3-run homer and keep the game close. So I don't think, they were swept by a Tennessee team that's 8th or 9th in the SEC early in the season, and sometimes Midwest teams struggle when they go down south early. So in the past, they competed well out west this year. They have played Coastal Carolina, who won the NCAA a few years ago. This Indiana baseball program is not a top 10 program to beat SEC teams, but I think the SEC teams have to play well to beat Indiana, and that's kind of fun being an Indiana fan. I don't think it's just going to be a shock and awe type thing coming from the Big Ten anymore. Big Ten baseball is really on the upswing.
I like that answer. I like it. Do you think there's a chance that Indiana has any potential of playing their old coach at Mississippi State?
That's one my son's a big fan as well. That's a little bit out of our driving range to go to the regional, but that's on our bucket list to go to. I don't, the name of the stadium's escaping me right now, but they just redid it, and they have tailgating in the outfield, built up tailgate spots, and it used to be man-made, and it got a little dangerous with some 2x4s holding up a deck, and so they rebuilt it, and then they have some apartments that you can rent in left field. It's just great baseball at Mississippi State, and to see Coach Lamonis again would be awesome, and Coach Cheeseborough, those guys that kept Indiana baseball strong. It would be awful to play Mississippi State because they are really good as a baseball team. They have some good players. So, I think there's a chance that could happen, and we'll see next Monday when the selection show comes out.
That I think that'd be really cool to see in terms of just seeing playing Mississippi State, like you talked about, playing the spectacle that they are and playing against their old coach. But in terms of the Hoosiers trying to move on into the next round, that wouldn't necessarily be good for them. But what should people watch for specifically in the next few weeks of postseason play for the Hoosiers? Like we kind of touched on this about a little bit in the Big Ten segment, but does it change at all when you get into those SEC teams or any other potential matchup nightmares, or just any extra people to watch out for?
Yeah, I think that the key thing for me, and this is my basketball background, you got to play solid defense when you're playing those big teams, whether it's UCLA ranked number 1, Vanderbilt. You got to catch the ball, you got to throw the ball, and what they say in Bull Durham, if you don't, that makes you lollygaggers or whatever. Nothing bothers me more than free runs. And when you play, the margin for error is smaller against those ranked opponents. And so run prevention, to me, is what our fans should really look for. Can we prevent those teams that can hit the baseball? Can we keep a runner off a second? Can we not throw the ball around and have errors? And are we throwing strikes? Run prevention to me is important. And I think, again, I don't want to put, and not that I will put too much pressure on this podcast, but Matt Gorski, if he can hit, I think really it's contagious. And so we'll go back to that. And then on the hitting side, can we limit strikeouts and put the ball and play hard? And if that approach works, I think Indiana can have a chance. The tough thing in the regional is you got to beat someone like a Vanderbilt or Louisville twice in order to get out, unless they get upset opposite you. So Indiana's played Louisville 8-7. They went down and played Kentucky and lost 5-2, and there was a 2-run pass ball in that game. So that's where I'm going with the run prevention. Those are two quality opponents, and Kentucky's not having a great year, but it is an SEC team. And Indiana went toe-to-toe pitching a midweek starter, which is usually their fourth or fifth best starter. So I think Indiana, wherever they get sent, will be a good competitive team. It'll be a surprise if they get to the Super Regional, but teams like that get to Super Regionals, and teams like Indiana at sometimes have made it all the way to Omaha. In 2013, Indiana went, and I was there, and it was an awesome experience to see the Candy Stripe fans walking into the stadium there in Omaha.
Well, you've killed it with the what am I talking about? With the sliding into the next question. Anyways, what would make a successful NCAA tournament outing? I know you just talked about it being a surprise to make the Super Regional, but new coach, exceeded season expectations. The Hoosiers need to get out of the regional to feel successful, or might it depend on the matchups and
yeah, I'm going to give you two answers. I'm a big Herm Edwards fan, not so much as a coach, but for when he said you play to win the game. Mm-hmm. And a successful tournament is winning. And there's just no way, and it doesn't mean that you're a failure if you don't. It just means you weren't successful. Mm-hmm. And Indiana can play really good baseball and compete and can come home. And they did that last year. They lost to Texas A&M, came back, won a game, then had to play Texas A&M again, defeated Texas A&M, and then had a really good battle with Texas. Nothing to hang your head on about that kind of performance, but that's not successful. Successful is getting to Omaha. And I think Indiana baseball is not there yet to have those kinds of expectations every year. But if you don't set that, then you're never going to reach those goals. And so a successful tournament is getting to Omaha. I would say in reality, winning the regional would be very successful. And then other than that, you just want to compete and not hand losses in the tournament. It's probably more realistic as a fan. But I don't believe in setting sights low for any program that I run or I'm part of or that I follow. You get into the tournament and you go win. And I'll be disappointed if they don't win, and then I'll just wake up the next day and then watch the Cubs or something, So, but I just have high expectations for all Indiana programs. I expect Indiana to go to a bowl and win a bowl game, and that doesn't happen. Wow. I expect the women's program to win in the NCAA. They got beat by Oregon, disappointed. That's what Indiana athletics are about. It's about winning, and so. But there's nothing wrong with giving it your best and losing too. It's again, I think I define you can learn from failure, but you can learn from not being successful and move the program ahead. So, yeah, I think successful will be get to Omaha, but realistically, just competing in the regional is probably where we should settle on.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Great answers. For those that are curious about being able to follow the postseason travels that Indiana has within the next week to a few weeks, hopefully, Big Ten tournament will. All of it is on BTN, so get to watch all of that kind of stuff. Monday, the selection show. I'm pretty sure. I think it's ESPNU. They're televising it somewhere, but if not, of course, Twitter's going to let you know. The Indiana Baseball Twitter account is going to let you know everything, and then stuff's going to start pretty soon. And unless they have a really bad matchup, I would assume somewhere on some ESPN thing, we're going to be able to watch them going forward in the postseason. So, Brian, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on this podcast with us this evening. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing, but we really appreciate it. The listeners aren't already following you in just anything and everything you do. Where can they find you on social media or the internet?
Well, I'm all over the place. I like to talk. First of all, thank you. You guys do a good job at Indiana HQ promoting Indiana and sharing Indiana news. It's an honor. I've been working with you guys behind the scenes on some of my stuff with websites and so forth. Just an honor to be asked to be on the show. Anytime you need an old guy with no hair to, make you guys look good, let me know, and I'll be glad to be on the show. But I can be followed at Sony42. I do run a bracketology club in basketball, and hopefully be sharing that with your site as well. A student-run high school club, DelphiBracketology.com and at Delphi Brackets. I have a podcast called Sports Talk with Tonsoni at Sports Tons on Twitter. So I'm all over the place. But thanks for giving me the ability to shout that information out.
Yeah, sure. I'll put it all in show notes and everything in our script and everything if you want to go follow him. And the Delphi Bracketology stuff, they're great. So if you're around tournament season, following it from anywhere throughout the year, they're very good at what they do. And high schoolers no less, just great stuff to watch. So that about wraps it up for our 89th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. One of us will be back next Monday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. Big thanks to that live audience again for coming out and just participating in that chat. Make sure to stay tuned through updates on Twitter. Visit our website, indianahq.com, and subscribe so you can get all those episodes right to your phone. Send us your questions as the audience on what you have, so we'll get them on our next episode. Most importantly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook. Tell a friend, share our links. Your support is really how we grow this podcast. We can reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.